You are Locked On Falcons POSTCAST, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Falcons POSTCAST, your home for the best Atlanta Falcons football talk. It's local insight you can't get anywhere but right here at Locked On. I'm your host, Tenitra Batiste. Alongside me are Jarvis Davis and Aaron Freeman. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. And our Locked On Falcons POSTCAST is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So it's week 13 in the NFL, but coming off the bye week, it feels like a couple of bleak weeks, Falcons football all over again. But we're going to talk about how finally, that's not the defense's problem. And we're going to talk about how special teams, for the most part, showed up pretty well today. But let's just keep this thing, as Jarvis would like to say, 'cause I don't want to make it sound like it's mine. Let's just keep it funky and tell the truth and shame the devil about what we saw on offense today in a 17-13 loss by the Falcons to the Los Angeles Chargers at the Benz. So Jarvis, you're on the other side of a bye week. You're back at home and you're thinking, hey, that's got to be a formula for success. Everybody's looking for the reset. And we know that, hey, this is going to be a team that if the reset happens, it's going to be courtesy of what happens on the offense. But Kirk wasn't courtesying anybody today, if we want to be honest about the performance that we saw from him. And that's kind of where you have to start. Because when you look at the fact that it seemed like every time the Falcons were in a position to take over this game, something happened, whether it was Tarheeb still getting a couple picks, one of which was a pick six, whether it was getting into the situation where you're in the red zone and there he goes again, and Kirk Cousins makes an interception. And then, of course, the final nail in the coffin, he throws, and Derwin James, who, by the way, I don't think he had a pick all season long. Derwin James picks him off, and that's game. So I got to ask you, Jarvis, because you always keep it real, and I've got to ask our voice of reason, Aaron, what his thoughts are as well. Kirk was brought in to essentially save this team, so why does it feel like he's killing it? Why?
You know what, guys? I've come to the conclusion that my standards for quarterback play have been lowered. Because,
do tell.
You know, like Kirk Cousins, throw out the window that he's 36 years old and he's seen and played a lot of football. Just throw it out the window, and just understand that he's the type of guy that when under pressure, he doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know who to throw the football to. He doesn't understand that the person with the opposite color jersey on, you're not supposed to throw it or eat it. Take the sack. Throw it away. There's just so many options that you have instead of throwing it to where the guy with the white and blue jersey is sitting right there waiting on it. And then, oh my God, the pick six, that was so bad. So bad.
Yeah.
This man is throwing outside the numbers late. Outside the numbers late. And you see, like the Chargers weren't playing difficult, super disguisey coverages. They weren't doing that just from the naked eye, you know what I'm saying? Without looking at the all 22. But so I'm just trying to understand, what are you seeing? Because there's never been a time, especially today, where Kirk is throwing an interception. And I'm saying, man, I understood why he threw that ball. I totally thought I knew what he was thinking when he threw that ball. Yeah. Every ball he threw today, I was just like, why would you throw that? And if I'm sitting up here saying that, that kind of, I have a little PTSD, going back to when Marcus Mariota and Desmond Ridder were at quarterback. And am I really supposed to be thinking about that, about the quarterback position at this point in the season?
Yeah. And not just at this point in the season, Jarvis, but Aaron, if we're being honest, and I agree with Jarvis, to me, it has nothing to do with the age, being that Kirk Cousins is 36. It has to do with the fact that at this point in his career, we shouldn't be questioning whether or not, for a guy who's going into year 13, we shouldn't be questioning his decision-making. We shouldn't be questioning his ability to guide this offense in a situational football. That shouldn't be the conversation that we're having. And we're looking, on the other side there, and he didn't have a monster day as you would expect from Justin Herbert, but it was enough. The guy got sacked 5 times, and yet 16 of 23 for 147 yards, and he played a clean game because there were no interceptions. So if we're talking about decision making and we're talking about veteran play calling, I don't like the fact that, to Jarvis's comment or to Jarvis's point, that I'm feeling like we're taking a step back, or we're seeing this offense take a step back with QB1, who's been in this situation over and over again.
Yeah, as Jarvis said, terrible decisions on Kirk on all those interceptions. Obviously, the last one, he's just trying to make a play on a 4th and 12 there. And then I think
that's after he fumbled the ball, and it was like third.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. It's tough. I'll defend Kirk a little bit on the third interception, because when he started scrambling, I think the receivers didn't know what to do because they'd never seen that the entire season. So they're like, what should we run to the back? I've never seen that before. So I think that's why Kirk just kind of floated it up, expecting guys to sort of work that scramble drill. And they just had no clue what they were doing, because there's like, Kirk running? Like, I've never seen this before. So terrible decision by Kirk. Yeah, it's rough. Like, it's really indefensible, the play of Kirk Cousins. This was by far his worst game. And, you really needed your offense. Jarvis talked about it. You talked about it. Like, you really need your offense to kind of step up and carry this team. And you really need the quarterback. And we've talked all season long about having that grown up in the room and having the guy that can be the leader and bring this thing together. And then you get to this game, and he's just like forcing passes to Darnell Mooney and forcing passes to Drake London that he has no business forcing the football to. Kyle Pitts is basically an afterthought in this offense. Like, it just, there's so many things that went wrong today offensively. And it all started with your quarterback just not doing the things, the real basic things that you just needed your quarterback to do in this game. And so it's a pretty indefensible performance from Kirk.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, to your point about the whole Kyle Pitts piece, and I know we're gonna talk about adjustments the defense made, and I really like what I saw from that standpoint. But when you think about and look at Kyle Pitts's the frequency in which he was used today, it wasn't that high. Like, there were times where Charlie Warner was in there, and they started getting to a point where when he was in the game, he was running a lot, and then they started passing when Charlie was in the game, and he even got a catch in the game. So I think that is that an adjustment? Is that what we're going to start to see going forward? Kyle Pitts, and then you finally get in the game, Kyle Pitts, and then they throw the ball to you when Kirk. I know for a fact that Kirk was expecting you to keep running through that defender, so you can have a potential to at least for it to be a catch. You make a tough catch, or you force the referee to throw the flag because it's PI. I think that I've come to the conclusion that Kyle is not ready for whatever role the Falcons, want him to play in this offense. And that's why I feel like you saw a lot more of Charlie Warner, not only in run situations, but you saw him in the game when they were passing the football as well.
Okay, so Jarvis, before we wrap this up, go back to that last statement that you made. I think you said the words "not ready" and Kirk Cousins in the same sentence. Did I hear you correctly?
I said Kyle's not ready. Kyle's not ready for whatever role they want him to be in this offense.
So it's Kyle.
Yeah.
But that still makes my point salient, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Why in week 13 is anybody on this offense or in this offense not ready for whatever it is that is the assignment? To be fair, it's week 13. I mean, yeah, you may have made some adjustments during the bye week in terms of what roles and responsibilities were going to be, but that shouldn't be a part of the commentary at all.
I mean, I before I even said something or even tweeted about it, like, I had to kind of double check, triple check, quadruple check. I was like, okay, like, 8 is not in the game. He hasn't been in the game, So when I see when you talk about this offense is saying, hey, we're going to make adjustments, they've been struggling, they're trying to put up more points, and you see your tight end that you drafted number 4 overall not in the game as much, or at least to the point where people like, okay, like when the last time he been in there? You know what I'm saying? And they having a lot of success running the football. Now the Chargers against the Ravens, taking it back. We talk about when the film's out, the book is out on you. Hey, we can run the football on this team on the Chargers. So yeah, Charlie Warner gonna play a little bit more. But when you start to see, until they got to the situation where they had to pass the football, that's the only time you really saw picks come in. And I'm just like, and when you target him in the game, and there seems to be a miscommunication between him and the quarterback, and he's not where he's supposed to be, hey, that's the only conclusion I can come to.
Yeah, I mean, we were having these same conversations in September. So I think that reiterates your point, T, where it's like, why are we having these same conversations in December where you should have worked all of these issues out by this point in the season? And clearly the Falcons have not worked out those issues.
Yeah, and one more question. I know I said we're going to wrap up, but I do have to ask you guys just quickly, because we do always talk about this. We talked about it on the football parties last week and even before the bye for the last game, where we thought those coordinators were. Now, obviously, we're going to talk about a good game that Jimmy Lake called and the defense played. We'll talk about Marquise Williams and the game he called for special teams. So I'd be remiss if I don't ask you guys at least about your thoughts on the game that Zac Robinson called.
I wasn't a big fan. It was a pretty, I was so frustrated.
Super mid.
Yes, the short yardage situation. Like they're running the jet sweeps and whatnot. I'm not mad at the Falcons running jet sweeps in those situations, just because they're like the worst short yardage running team in the NFL. They've been for 2 years, and so when they've tried to run it up the middle, you saw it a couple of times in this game. They don't get it. But like those are situations where it's like that first one where Derwin James, like, why are we having Ray McLeod block Derwin James? Like, isn't this the time where this is where the 12 person, like you have 12 personnel on the field for 2 plays this game? Like those are kind of the situations where it's like, why are we just running our entire offense out of 3 wide receiver, 11 personnel? It's like, again, I 90%. Okay, just give me 10%, 2 tight ends, like just like 5 plays. That's all I need is just 5 plays, man.
Aaron, the Chargers were in the I formation.
I'm excited when I saw Charlie Warner line up in the backfield on one play, and I think the Falcons got 3 yards off of it. So I was like, "Oh my god, they're changing things up." So that was a little. I was bothered by that. Yeah. So
I understand your plight, sir.
Not a fan of Zac Robinson's game plan today.
Well, for once in recent memory, we can actually say we're not bothered by how the defense played, because they did what they came to do. Period. We'll explain in the deep dive. This episode of our Locked On Falcons postcast is brought to you by IceShaker. Hey, Locked On Falcons fans, I know you're like me and your holiday shopping list is far from complete. Well, if that's the case, I got the perfect gift for the passionate sports fan in your life. Perhaps you heard of IceShaker. It's now officially licensed with the NFL, NHL, NBA, NCAA, and Major League Baseball, and it'll make the ideal gift. It was actually created by and used by the Gronkowski brothers, and they have sold over 1 million bottles. They've changed the game with workout bottles, and this is the gift you've been looking for. So go to IceShaker.com and use the code LOCKEDONNFL at checkout to save 25% on your order. It's customizable, which I think is so cool. You can send them the logo, check out the custom shop, and customize your favorite bottle. The turnaround time is also really good during the holidays because it's 3 to 5 business days. So order your team branded bottles today at IceShaker.com and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for 25% off your order. IceShakers, show your support for your teams with the best branded workout bottles on the market, IceShakers. This episode of our Locked On Falcons postcast is also brought to you by BetterHelp. How do you stay cozy during the winter months? And yes, we are kind of finally getting into winter here in Atlanta. For some, wrapping up in a blanket with a mug of hot chocolate or watching a movie with family is the best way. But therapy is also a great way to bring yourself some comfort that never goes away, even when the season changes. So if you're thinking of starting therapy and ending this year on a high note, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. And if it doesn't work out, switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. So find comfort this December with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOn today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOn. So, Aaron, when you think about going back to the beginning of the game, right? Falcons had a pretty impressive start on defense. They gave up, of course, 11 on the first play, but then they followed up with some good plays, whether you look at the no gain from Caden Ellis, that tackle, and then you look at Jesse Bates, who, of course, had his typical a pass broken up. And I'll say with AJ Terrell had a pass broken up as well, and you get the Chargers to punting. But I think what we really liked about what we saw defensively was this actually might have been an even better Oreo game than normal. Like, we'll start off with something positive and then it gets shaky and then it gets better at the end. But I actually think this was a pretty consistent game defensively across the board. But what do you think about the performance that you saw, the answer to this much maligned defense coming on the other side of the bye for the Falcons?
Well, T, I can nitpick, but I don't feel compelled to nitpick about anything with the defense today. I think you saw good performance on all three levels. Obviously, the front getting 5 sacks, and some of those sacks being coverage sacks where nobody was getting open. The back end, I know Jarvis noticed this. You saw AJ Terrell consistently in press coverage in this game, which is something that we know AJ Terrell can do at a high level. You saw the Falcons running man coverage. Ladd McConkey had a big first half, but basically outside of Ladd McConkey's first half, there's really nothing negative I can say about the defense. The back end made a bunch of plays. Jesse Bates had multiple pass breakups. AJ had them, as you mentioned. Justin Simmons had one. D. Alford had one. Caden Ellis had one. Clark Phillips had a good game. All that stuff. So to me, it was like the defense pretty much checked every box that you wanted to see them check. They were able to get after the quarterback. You didn't really see Herbert use his legs. They were able to mostly shut down the run game outside of a couple of runs. They were able to lock down these receivers outside of and really when we talk about Ladd McConkey, it was that one, 60-yard play or 50-yard play that he had that really sort of bolstered his numbers in a major way. And so, outside of, 2 or 3 other catches from Ladd McConkey, like pretty much every, goal that you would have set for this Falcons defense going into this game, they were able to check. And so kudos to the Falcons defense for playing this way. I don't know how many more games we're going to get the rest of the season like this, because it just feels like the Falcons has found a way to blow this as well as they possibly could, with arguably the worst performance of Kirk Cousins this season, with the best performance of the Falcons defensive performance. So it's just, you're going to get this sort of two-faced version of the Atlanta Falcons somehow, some way.
Yeah, I tell you, it was one of those where you felt like, okay, we just can't get right with all 3 phases. But yeah, Jarvis, you got to give so much love to what you saw from the defensive side of the ball. Only 10 first downs for the Chargers today, 3 of 11 on third down, and they only had 187 yards in total yardage. So yeah, even when you saw Ladd McConkey kind of getting those chunk plays, especially in the first half of the game, I love what Free said, like AJ Terrell was right there. He was, and that's what you love to see. So yeah, I think you got what you wanted to see up front. That's how you get those 5 sacks. And then you got what you wanted to see from the back end as well. I thought it was a pretty overall solid performance from this defense today.
Yeah, they had the corners down and press on 1st and 10, T. That made my heart happy. Yeah. And then on 2nd down, Caden Ellis he's actually rushing the passer on 2nd down, gets the sack, and then on 3rd down, D. Alford with the sticky coverage almost gets a pick. Yeah. I always talk about how he can get beat, but he's going to be right there to make the tackle most of the time when D. Alford's in coverage. And then when you see him not only being there, hey, I got my man. I know I got my man. I'm where I'm supposed to be. I'm right in this hip pocket. I'm where I'm supposed to be. He takes it a step further and breaks on the football and almost picks it off. That's the stuff I'm talking about. Jimmy Lake was putting his players in position to be successful. Why I say that? Like Aaron and I had a conversation about how I wish I could combine all these three linebackers into one linebacker, and that'll be a hell of a exciting experiment. When you talk about Nate Lamons against the run, Caden Ellis rushing the passer, and you talk about Troy Anderson's speed and coverage. Like, if you can put that into one linebacker, oh my God, you'll save 2 roster spots, by the way. And they would have a hell of a playmaker. And I think that I saw a little bit of that in Caden Ellis today. Not only was he rushing the passer, dude was in coverage too, in zone coverage. He was moving. Justin Herbert eyes went that way. Boom, he followed that way. Oh, let me knock his ball down here in the red zone so I can force him to kick a field goal. Yeah. That's the type of stuff that I'm talking about. Like, those are the little adjustments that you can make that, you can make this defense look like they belong in the whole Oreo label. I'm still quite not sure how that's working out to you, but I'm a follower, man. I got your back. You know what I'm saying? So, but and be that bend, but don't break defense by forcing turnovers. Like, all that stuff is doable. It's doable, but it's the thing for me is that I find it interesting that they were able to get 5 sacks.
Yeah.
They changed up. They made some adjustments, and we still didn't see.
Oh, I already know. 15? Yeah, 15.
Yeah.
I knew
Herbert one time. He hit him one time.
He was a spy. He was a spy. And he at least breathed on Herbert. Okay, I give him that. I give him a credit for a breath. Like that, yeah. Ain't gonna call it hurry, a breath. Yeah.
One more quarterback hit than we've gotten from like the last month. So I'll take it.
I give him a credit for a breath, not a hurry.
And actually,
when he saw those red sleeves.
Well, the official statisticians gave him a little bit of credit. They gave him an official 1 QB hit on the day. But in all seriousness, I do like the fact that we were having conversations about some of our unusual suspects, because the usual suspects are Caden Ellis doing his job. The usual suspects are Jesse Bates III and even AJ Terrell. We still have some positive conversations about him in that secondary. But yeah, exactly. And it's been progressing, right? It's been trending up as the season has gone on. But for you, Aaron, when you look at the way that Jimmy Lake used his players and kind of allowed them to be able to make the plays, I want to say in concert, because obviously he's scheming it, but they're executing it. But there were a couple names today that kind of encouraged me as well, because, hey, 3rd and 1, Low Carter punching a ball out and Clark Phillips recovering. Woo-woo. That was a name we hadn't heard in a minute. Kentavious Street, that's another name that we hadn't heard in a minute, just in terms of making yeah, exactly. So, we hadn't heard that name, but he got the 4th sack on the day, which at that point was a season high. And obviously now we know the 5 sacks is a season high. But Aaron, I think that was also encouraging that we weren't just hearing from and talking about the usual suspects, but the unusuals as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, T, because that's a testament to good defense where the role players, I'm sure the Chargers are looking at Tarheeb still and going like, hey man, you had a great day today. And I'm sure 99% of the people watching us or listening to us right now, at least are Falcon fans, who the heck is Tarheeb still? But that's what you get from good defense, where these role players, you're not asking Clark Phillips to go down there and shut down a guy. But if you can get your hands on the football, if you can recover a football, we just need you to make one play, right? We know who the 4 or 5 best players, those are the guys that are going to make multiple plays in a game, like Grady Jarrett, AJ Terrell, Jesse Bates, etc. Right? But for the other players, the Kentavious Streets, the Lorenzo Carters, the Clark Phillipses, those guys, we just need you to make one play. When you get in that position to break up that pass or to punch the ball out or make that open field tackle, whatever it is, make the play. And collectively, that's how we play good collective defense, where all 11 guys are out there contributing. That's what you saw today.
And there was another side of the ball that looked like they were going back into form, and that's Marquise Williams' squad. We'll talk about them, but also we got to be real and talk about what's next for these Falcons when we come back in What's Next. This episode of our Locked On Hawks postcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. Now, the FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Now, let's keep it real. we're about less than a month away from Christmas, and I know everybody's going to start scrambling so that they can get the gifts. Maybe you'd like to make a few extra dollars in the meantime. This might be the way to do it. So go to FanDuel.com, never waste a hunch, and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL and America's #1 sportsbook. This episode of our Locked On Falcons Postcast is also brought to you by Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. All-in pricing is a toggling feature that shows you the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout, and they have the lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Now, terms do apply, but again, after we wrap up Locked On Falcons Postcast, create that account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today, because what time is it? It's game time. So, guys, it's been up and down, kind of back and forth with special teams over the last few weeks of this season. And that's not a conversation that we've had very often. Now, granted, we do want to kind of give the disclaimer, right? Because at the end of the day, we certainly know that Younghoe Koo has been battling a right hip injury. He was on the injury report throughout this week. He missed the 35-yard attempt wide right. That's something that we've never had conversation about, especially saying Younghoe Koo missed 6 of his last 10 kick attempts. So before we kind of go into some of the positives, I just want to ask you guys as well. At least he kind of came back, and redeemed himself, if you will, because he was able to convert on a couple of field goals. But for you guys, where do you kind of stand as far as Younghoe Koo goes? Or should we be concerned about where this goes the rest of the season, especially if we keep getting in situations like this where it's a tight game for these Falcons as they close out the season?
I believe that they did the right thing by signing a kicker to the practice squad.
Yes.
So if these things were to continue, you have an option. Because one thing that I don't want to see is not having a kicker as an option and him continue to have these blue misses. Or, I mean, I know he's dealing with an injury, but if you're injured, you don't need to be out there. Like that. So my thing is that in this particular situation where he missed, several field goals, early on, and eventually lost the game for the Falcons, and given this situation, I feel like the best thing for them to do is have an option right there on the practice squad, ready to go, and not be scrambling trying to find someone to replace him when it just goes completely off the rails. That's where I'm at.
Indeed. And of course, that kicker being Riley Patterson. But for you, we did actually see something that was encouraging as well, and that's Bradley Pinion, who continues to do some good work, Aaron. He had 2 kicks today, averaged 41 yards. So in those situations, you at least are able to say, hey, he gave you something that allowed the Chargers not to have great field position, at least on those couple possessions. So I think that was a positive for the Falcons. But what are the things that you see in terms of what Marquise Williams' group was able to do from a special teams perspective today that in part helped the Falcons to stay in this game?
Well, the Falcons got another stop on a fake punt. Teams probably should just stop trying to fake punts against the Falcons, because they've shut it down pretty much all season long. Shout out to Kevin King, who I've kind of made fun of in terms of his defensive contributions. But hey, making the plays on special teams to make the plays, I certainly think was a good thing. And he made a great open field tackle there on that fake punt. And so, as you mentioned, like the special teams unit has not been its usual self this year, in part due to Koo's inconsistency, but you've seen some other things with the return game, and you've seen the Falcons give up some big returns as well and whatnot. So their special teams hasn't been great all season long. And again, minus the Koo early miss in this game, which is a lot more excusable this week due to the injury than it had been in previous games. It was nice to see the special teams kind of bounce back.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is it's really cool to see them being prepared for the unknown or the unexpected, right? Because I'm assuming that the Chargers got a look that they say, hey, if we get this look, we're gonna go for the fake, and for them to be able to come up big like that, I feel like that lets you know that Marquise Williams is doing his job, and I think that can mean nothing but good things for him, going forward.
So when we take a step back and kind of look at this holistically, right? Because we know that now the Falcons are at 500, and I know that we didn't necessarily. For me, I think we were talking about this. Like some of us thought from our Atlanta football party family that maybe the Falcons were going to go into that bye 6-5, maybe 7-4, if you will. But I don't know that we necessarily felt like they were going to be stumbling into the bye off of back-to-back losses and then coming off the bye on a loss again. Now you're going up to Minnesota. Then you got to go to Vegas. Then, okay, you got New York. But anywho, it's really probably that Minnesota Vikings game that, kind of is the one that stands out. And maybe the game after that Giants game probably would be that Commanders game. Those are probably the two that would be the toughest on the back end. But Jarvis and Aaron, for you guys, when you look at where Raheem Morris finds himself right now, what can he do? What should he do to kind of reset on offense? I got to ask you guys the question because you already know we answered it before the bye because we knew the question was coming. So it's coming back again. People are going to start asking about Michael Penix Jr.
What do you think?
I mean, I respect Jeremy Fowler, as a reporter, and his sources are pretty doggone solid. I find it interesting that there's a report coming out about Kirk Cousins played down the stretch, and that's probably determining whether or not the Falcons are going to consider trading him. So if you are in a situation where he's not playing well right now and you want to focus this offense around John Robinson and giving him touches and throwing him the football and throwing it 15 to 20 times a game, and being able to take some shots down the field and use play action more, I wouldn't be mad at that, to be honest with you, because like I said, like I mentioned earlier, I'm not a fan of quarterbacks at this age and what they've experienced in the league turn the ball over like this, because we can't be saying, what are you doing after you throw a pick? I'm sorry. He's 36. He played a lot of football for 13 years in the league. What we doing?
Well, I'll say this. Shout out to Jeremy Fowler, another everydayer of the Locked On Falcons podcast. Because he comes out with his report on Wednesday. I talked about it on Locked On Falcons on Monday. So, I wonder where that conversation came from. But yeah,
bro. We all know that you're the Falcons.
It is what it is. It is what it is. But basically what I said, for those of you that missed that episode of Locked On Falcons, it's going to be a conversation this offseason about trading Kirk. Basically, the question was going to be, how loud is that conversation going to be? And that's going to be heavily dependent on how these next 6 games go. And it's not off to a great start. I know there's going to be a very strong and vocal push for the Falcons to make the move now to Michael Penix. The Falcons are 500. I feel like they have to lose probably a couple more games with Kirk Cousins playing poorly before that becomes a real conversation in season. But it's certainly going to be a conversation this offseason. And we'll see if, Kirk, my hope is, that Kirk had his eyes on the Vikings game because he knows that's a big game for him next week. And so he just kind of laid an egg this week, and he put all his good energy. Today we got nothing but chaos.
Okay.
All of it's coming next week against the Vikings. That's my hope, but we'll see.
And we're going to roll with that. So on that note, we appreciate our everydayers for making the Locked On Falcons postcast your first listen of the day. Be sure to stop by the Atlanta Football Party Mondays and Thursdays for a double dose of all things Falcons. And be sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're also free and available wherever you download your podcasts.